Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I had the audacity to go out of town and not bring my laptop this weekend, and that, Tony, triggered an absolute tsunami of commitments for the Ohio State Buckeyes. To Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni, I say you are welcome.
You did this on purpose, Tom, not unlike me in like the sixth grade when I joined band, but I didn't want to be in band, so I would leave my saxophone on the bus. Several $100s of equipment that was not mine, but I'm okay with it being lost. That way I could go to a band that day and be like, I wanted to play saxophone so bad today, but I must have left it on the bus. And then, like helpful bus driver, doo, 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 doo. You left this. Bus drivers are just the worst. Just the worst. No, that's not true. But anyway, yes, we are here to talk a little bit about the Ohio State wide receiver class. So far, they added Jordan Donahoo this weekend. And if you've got to scroll down, if you're looking at the overall recruiting class, you've got to scroll it down. The number 1,204 player in the 24/7 composite, the number 151 wide receiver in the nation, the number 123rd player in Florida. It comes from Oviedo, Florida, high school there, and 6'4", 180, 190. A very interesting and intriguing prospect. Tom, we got some intel over the weekend about why those rankings are so low, and maybe don't expect those rankings to stay as low. Although now that he's committed, there's no reason to move him up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have our buddy Dominique Smith down in the Orlando area. He covers high school track down there in Florida. Longtime friend of the show. Got some information from him over the weekend on the numbers for Jordan Donahoo. I almost said Fakato. That was the defensive lineman. Sorry, there've been a lot of commitments. I've been out of town. Sorry. Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of the numbers you're seeing are right now from his freshman year. Like a lot of the numbers that have sort of been floating around there that, he's his time in the 100 meters is slow. That's a time from his freshman year. It sounds like, according to the folks that Dominique has talked to down there, he's around like a 4 or 5 in terms of the 40, which, kind of matches more what you see on film. And, that being said, this is not someone who's going to be rocketing up into the top 50s nationally, but this is someone who, it's an intriguing prospect. It's a little bit of a lottery ticket where there are some intriguing different traits there. You got some size, you got some speed. This is not someone who they need to bring in, who they need to have, starting year one, and is absolutely not going to do that, and might be a multi-year project. But it's someone who, if he can put it together, there are some traits there in terms of size, in terms of speed, that could turn him into a pretty intriguing prospect. And if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out, and you're not building the whole class around him. But if you hit there, then that's a real bonus for you.
Yeah, and his junior highlights show really good hands, really good ball concentration, that sort of thing. And the size is there, as you said. So this is the kind of developmental recruit that we've started to see now, with the increase in roster size and scholarship numbers, and also the 5-for-5. If somebody is willing to work for it, and there will still be NIL for him, but it's not like he's commanding much right now. So this is a guy that you can afford to develop. The guys you can't afford to develop are the guys that want to be paid like starters who aren't ready to start. This is not that. And so there's an opportunity. I expect him to have a good year this year. He was, I think, as Dominic said in our group text, maybe the number 2 receiver last year. That the number 1 receiver is now gone. So there are going to be more opportunities for him, and he'll show some things. He'll have an opportunity to show some things this season. But this is kind of the state of recruiting now, when Ohio State has their premier wide receiver commit in Jameer Brown, who is a 5-star and has an NIL situation that would be commensurate with those kinds of guys. They missed out on Blake Wong, who is a top 250, 300 player that would be in the middle kind of that NIL situation. And then, of course, Jordan Donahoo down here, who is, you know, the big value for him is Ohio State rather than NIL. It's the opportunity to play at Ohio State education, get developed, all of those things, which when you're growing up as a kid, like, yeah, I would love that. Please, if I could only do that. And then the opportunity from Cortez Hankton comes along and says, we would like you to play for Ohio State. Okay, let's do it. So now they clearly want another wide receiver in the class. They would love to get five-star Monshon Sales. I don't know that Indiana's going to let him out of the state, frankly. They do everything in their power to keep that from happening. Benny Easter, currently still committed to Texas Tech, but has taken an official visit to Ohio State. So they're still trying. I don't know at this point if they strike out on those two guys. Do they go and get another developmental type? Do they just sit tight? Because you can always just make up for it in the transfer portal. And maybe you target somebody like the receiver version of Dominic Kelly in the portal, where it's a guy who's been in college for a year but is looking for a change.
Yeah, that's certainly an option. And you're also at a spot where they brought in three very good guys last year in Chris Henry Jr. and Jaquaden Guilford and Brock Boyd, all of whom we're expecting to at least see the field this year. And you also brought in Jaden Ricketts, who is a local kid out of Pataskala, who is he's a little bit more of that sort of developmental guy where it's going to be okay, we'll see it in a year and we'll see where you are at that point. You've got Jameer Brown for this year already. You're looking at Jet Harrison, among other guys, for 2028, and they had a bunch of really talented 2028 wide receivers in for camp in June. So there's a lot of names to kind of keep an eye on there. You've already got Austin Miller, a 5-star for 2029 committed. So at this point, my guess would be it's going to more or less be try and get the one elite guy per class. And then if you can add a second good piece, great. But the fact that the wide receiver recruiting was so good last season, part of that's probably Brian Hartline was still there, but also part of it is that's where they sunk a lot of resources last year. Once Brian Hartline left, there was a real concerted effort to make sure Chris Henry and Jaquaden Guilford and Brock Boyd and everyone else signed with Ohio State. And this year, we just did a morning show about, boy, this could be Larry Johnson's best defensive line recruiting class ever. Now, last year's defensive line recruiting class was not Larry Johnson's best ever. This year's very well could be. So that tells you a little bit about where some of the resources are going this year, because you can't just sink all of your NIL money into wide receiver every year. That, number one, that doesn't make sense. You got it. You have to fill all the position rooms. But number two, you just brought in three guys who you expect to be able to play at least a little bit this year, and you would figure are kind of rotational players at the very least, starting in 2027. So you don't need to go super deep this year. If you bring in one guy who you feel very good about and maybe a second piece, and then you've got sort of a project, then that's probably fine. And you try and get a Jet Harrison and kind of follow that same basic path in 28. You've got Austin Miller already at the top of your class in 29. It feels like that's probably a fairly sustainable model for what stacking a room looks like. You get a 5-star, a 4-star, and then whatever else you get. As long as you have a reasonably high hit rate, you don't need to hit on every single guy, but you have a reasonably high hit rate there, that's going to keep your room pretty well stocked. I don't think you're going to be in a desperation mode to go into the portal. But as you said, if there's someone who's out there who, Dominic Kelly, of course, who you mentioned, was a freshman at Georgia last year as a true freshman, and then entered the portal, and Ohio State said, sure, we'll take you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kirby Smart, for your help in developing this fine player. And now Dominic Kelly is set to probably be at least a rotational player at the outside corner positions for Ohio State this year. So is there someone who's at Alabama or Georgia or Missouri or Kentucky or Michigan State or wherever that you could go out and get after this season? Yeah, entirely possible. That is certainly another option. That's the thing about the transfer portal. It opens up, you have a lot of different ways, between NIL and the transfer portal, that you can allocate your time, allocate your resources, and build your roster out.
One contention that I have, you said you can't just continue to sink money in only wide receivers. And I would say, as somebody who grew up playing Tecmo Super Bowl with the Houston Oilers, sir, yes, you can. All right. That's all I need. Just give me the wide receivers. Lorenzo White, I'm sorry, I don't have room for you. I just need to throw the ball. The second thing is if you do miss out and you only sign two guys, let's not forget Devin McEwen and Brandon Innes can come back next year.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Parker, unless he leaves early, is coming back next year. So that 5 for 5 right now will allow for a miss, and then you make it up in 2028, or again, you add somebody young. So it's just with the portal and now the 5 for 5 right now, missing out on your numbers is in recruiting is only the first part of missing out on your numbers and adding to your numbers. It used to be, boy, if you miss your numbers in recruiting, you've missed your numbers. Now it just means you've missed your first crack at the numbers. You'll have another crack, and then a third one, essentially by saying, well, why don't Brandon, Devin, why don't you guys come back? That sort of thing. So missing right now makes me think that there's no reason to add a second developmental player.
Yeah, I mean, if they look at it and they find someone else who's a good fit, sure, why not? If you can do it and it's not a huge allocation of resources and it's just, well, now we have to find another locker. Now we have to feed one more person. Like if that's what you're talking about, sure, why not? If you find someone who is an intriguing prospect, absolutely shoot your shot, because the downside is, one more person sitting at the table every day, and the upside is whatever that player turns into. So you have the roster spots, fill the roster spots. You can't go out there and drop enormous bags on everyone. But that's, it feels like they are sort of starting to really round out. I think there's sort of a little bit of a growing consensus across college football that you can't just have the Urban Meyer Florida classes where you have, oh well, there's 9 5-stars in this class. Like there is not the resources to pay those guys what it would take to get them on campus now, what it would take to continue to pay them as they go through their careers. That's just not viable anymore. But when you look at how Ohio State's doing it, and Ohio State is once again a top 5 class in the nation at this point, it feels like they have sort of started to settle in on a little bit of a formula for how they're going to build their classes.
I went back real quick and looked at the that 2010 Florida class where they had 6 to 8 5-star guys, and Ronald Powell, who really didn't do anything, Dominic Easley, who I think did, Sharif Floyd, Matt Elam, Josh Shaw, Jalen Watkins, so the greatest recruiting class of all time would have, if it was the greatest recruiting class of all time, then guys after Urban Meyer would have been able to win at Florida. I'll say that. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Some thoughts on the receiving. Like I'm saying, they don't need another developmental guy, but also there's no harm in it unless you just don't want to deal with it, unless you just don't want to put the time into it, because it's basically just bringing somebody else on a road trip, and it's meal money at this point. So there are our thoughts. Go ahead and throw your thoughts into the YouTube chat, the YouTube comments, if you've got any on the receiving recruiting situation at Ohio State right now. Thumbs up is always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified, as you all know. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.